Hello, everyone. Happy birthday to Swami Kriyananda. I'm sure he can hear us as we're doing this. So happy birthday, Swami. And for all of you joining us, it's a very happy birthday for all of us too, because it represents to many of us the birth of our spiritual life. I thought I would begin by reading my blog from this last week. Some years ago, I was with Swami and two other people from Ananda when we visited Ananda Ma. This was in 1974. And I wrote a blog about it, or a short passage about it, when Swami was still alive. So I shared this. This came out a few days before his birthday, last Friday. And I thought, many of you haven't had a chance to hear it, so I'll read it now. It's called Tribute to Kriyananda. I think you and I have been brothers in a past life. Swami Kriyananda once remarked to me, indeed, from the day I met him, I always felt a deep spiritual connection with Swamiji. Some years ago, while he was still alive, I wrote this Tribute to Kriyananda. And since May 19th is his birthday, I thought you might enjoy hearing it. One can tell much about a person by observing the effect he has on other people. This is certainly true of the extraordinarily positive effect that Swami Kriyananda has on the lives of others. Over the decades that I've known him, I think what stands out most strongly for me is his ability to give and attract unconditional friendship. Dozens of people consider him their best friend. I know of numerous occasions when he was the only one willing to extend a hand to someone who had finally succeeded in exasperating everyone else. By standing with them in their time of difficulty, he quietly transformed their lives. But to me, the most beautiful manifestation of divine friendship has been the love shown to him by God-realized souls. Kriyananda's relationship with Paramahansa Yogananda, his devotion and his discipleship, has been one of the formative influences in my life. He made Yogananda a dynamic, living reality in his own life and by his example, in mine and in the lives of many other Ananda members. The many stories I've heard and read about the interplay between the Guru Yogananda and this disciple Kriyananda have been magnets holding me steadfast on the path. I never had the blessing to be present when Master and Kriyananda were together. I was, however, there one time when he was with the great woman saint, Ananda Ma, and I saw the immense love and delight these two great souls had for one another. In the spring of 1974, a small group went with Swamiji to Hardwar, India, partly to see the Kumbh Mela, but more specifically to see Ma. The first time that our group saw Ma and Kriyananda together was during a private audience with just the four of us and an elderly Indian Swami who served as a translator. A deep and beautiful love flowed between the two of them, somewhat like the love between a mother and a son, but in many ways much closer. I have been with Kriyananda and his own mother many times, but his relationship with Ananda Ma was even more intimate. Not only was there the added spiritual dimension of two great lovers of God, but there was a palpable, intuitive connection between their minds. There were worlds of meaning in the simple glances they exchanged, and when they laughed together, it went far beyond mere merriment into the realms of divine joy. Seeing them together gave me my first real experience of what it must have been like to be enfolded in Yogananda's infinite love. Ma answered many of the questions we posed her by sweetly advising us to ask your guru. It took me quite a long time to realize that she was referring to Kriyananda, since I have always considered Yogananda to be my guru. But Ma was totally natural in suggesting that we treat Swamiji as a divine channel and go to him with our spiritual questions. The interview lasted about a half hour and ended with her blessing a large pile of beads, pictures, and other items that we'd brought with us from people at Ananda. As she held her hands over them, she said, "Why do you ask this body for blessing of these things? Don't you see that God's blessings are always flowing down?" The next day, there was a gathering of 20 or 30 people in a small courtyard for a satsang with Ma. She was in a wonderful childlike mood, laughing and playing. She took a flower garland that someone had placed around her neck and tossed it lasso style right around the neck of Swami, who was sitting about 15 feet away. As she did that, she laughed and clapped her hands. She then had one of her disciples bring out some yellow handkerchiefs containing prasad, food offered to God, and then eaten as a blessing, and threw one to each of the other 3 of us. She was warm, joyful, and childlike the whole time, and related to Swami in an extraordinarily sweet and kind way. The 2 days that we spent in her company are among the most precious memories of my life. The grace to be able to draw the love of great saints like Ma and Master is a blessing that flows through Swami to all who knew him. Over the years that I have been with him, I have seen a gradual transformation of Swami Kriyananda into an ever more pure channel of love and friendship. It is as if he is becoming a living example of Master's saying, "When I am gone, only love can take my place." In divine friendship, Nayaswamis Jyotish. There are many, many stories that we could tell about our time with Swami and have told about our times with Swami, but sometimes personal stories seem too personal in a way. And Swami wasn't necessarily personal in the sense exclusive in his relationship to even those who were very close to him. Yes, of course, he was very natural, very warm, very loving, very much a divine friend. But one never got the impression that he was that only for you and therefore somehow had to keep his friendship or his love from going to others. So it wasn't that he was impersonal. He was quite personal, but he was also personal with everyone, not exclusively just with a small group. And he often said that he didn't want people particularly to look at him. He wanted rather people to see the principles, the great teachings that he brought, that he learned from his master, and that he demonstrated. And so rather than look at him as a personality and say, "Oh, how wonderful you are," he preferred us to look at him, perhaps as a personality, but to say, "Oh, how wonderful these teachings are. How wonderfully you express those teachings. Thank you, Swami." And in that vein, I think we can celebrate all of us, those of us who met him and those of us who didn't meet him in the body. We can celebrate his birthday and do it in a manner that would be most pleasing to Him, which is to receive the grace, the blessings, the wisdom, the joy, and the divine love and friendship that He modeled for us so beautifully.
Greetings for Swami's birthday. We're so happy to be able to share the gifts and insights that we received, which were just a small portion of what he gave to the world. I first met Swamiji in 1969 when I came to Ananda. I had just arrived that day, and our paths happened to cross. It was the very beginning of Ananda. I was 22 years old. Swami was 43 years old. And it was, I had never met anyone like that before. I hadn't heard him lecture. I hadn't read anything he'd written. I simply had heard there was a community forming based on yoga and meditation. And having just graduated from college and uncertain about my next steps, I thought, well, I'll try this for this summer. But that first meeting, he said a few words to me, very few, but he walked by me. And when he walked by me, his posture, his bearing, his dynamic energy, very contained. It was though I felt this force field moving by me. And I had never experienced anything like that. I was not at all a devotee or a meditator, but I just knew that somehow this person was going to make something remarkable happen. And then time went by, and in the early years, because most of us were brand new to meditation and the teachings, he was our teacher. He was impersonal. He would give classes, he would sing some of the songs he's composed, but it was always a little distance, because I think we were checking him out, and I think very clearly in retrospect, he was checking us out. Are these people really sincere? Will they stay and help me build Master's work? Will they give their life to God? And the more he saw that that's what we were doing, the more he gave. I remember once I was living up at Ananda Meditation Retreat in just a little trailer. I was a single person at the time, little 10-foot trailer. And I had been meditating in the morning, and somehow that day, it was a very deep meditation, maybe one of the deepest I'd had till that point in my life. And I was walking, I'd finished my meditation, and I was walking up the little forest trails to come to our dining hall to have breakfast. And as I approached it, I saw Swami Kriyananda and several other people, maybe 100 yards away, and they were obviously having a discussion about the water tower and the well, and Swami's back was to me. And I just kept on my way. I knew they were involved with some business and didn't involve me. But as soon as I got to a certain point, Swami, whose back had been towards me, as I said, he just turned around and walked very quickly over to me. And he took my hands and he just looked in my eyes and he said, "Very good." He knew. He knew that I had had a deep inward experience of Master that morning. And that's what he was always looking for. That's what he was always trying to draw out of us. And Jyotish and I had the very good karma to be able to spend a lot of time with him, driving him places, working on projects together, going to different countries with him, taking him to town for going to a restaurant, being invited over for tea. But I could tell it wasn't personal. I could tell he felt comfortable with us for several reasons. One, we were always very respectful. We didn't talk much. We were quiet. We tried in his presence to, both receive his energy, but also to give him energy back. And he could tell that we saw him as a channel for Yogananda ji. It wasn't like often newer people would be very effusive in their way of relating to him. And it made him uncomfortable because he felt himself so unimportant. What he said was, all I want to be remembered for is that I was a good disciple. And the years went by, and as the years went by, the relationship became more impersonal. We would often be in the car with him or be in a room with him, and he wouldn't talk with us at all, but we were comfortable with that. There was one time, though, we hadn't seen him for many months. We were here at Ananda Village. He was living in Assisi, and we came over to spend some time with him, and I was so wanting to be with him. And I think he was really saying, no, you're trying to relate to me too personally. And he was very, very distant, more than usual. And at a certain point, he looked at me and he said, no one is special to me. I am not even special to myself. And so, as the years went by, I came to understand that what he had to give us, training in the teaching, receiving his blessed vibration. Sometimes he would invite us over for tea when he was here at Ananda Village, and we would go down to his little apartment, and he was in his recliner lounge chair, and he didn't hear us come in, and his eyes were closed, and it was so evident that he was in bliss. And then he would open his eyes, he would see us there, and he was never affected. It was just that he would start talking, oh, would you like some tea? Would you like to go for a little stroll in the garden? But he was always absolutely a child of God, natural, spontaneous, but also very aware that he had a responsibility for all of those who had come to him deeply and sincerely to bring us to God. And that, as the years went by, he was more in India, we saw him less, his health declined, but one never felt that he was not doing his part to bring each one of us to God. And I read a story that a friend of mine wrote, I read it recently. She was with him in India, and those last months of his life, his body was not cooperating. He was ill, one thing after another. But he was going to be leaving the next day to go back to Assisi, where he left his body. He was 87 years old, and he was giving a little satsang, the last satsang, in fact, that he did in India, because he never returned. And he was talking about, towards the end of Master's life, when Swamiji asked him the question, will you be as much with us after you leave the body as you are now? And Master said, to those who think me near, I will be near. And then Swami's discourse went on, and at a certain point, someone very sweetly asked the question, Swamiji, will you be as much with us after you leave the body as you are now? And this person who was recounting the story said, Swami paused for a long time as though really trying to feel the right answer that was imbued with truth and humility and honesty. And then he said very quietly, if I am able to achieve what I hope to achieve, I will be with all of you. Yes, yes. So this year, 2020, he would have been 94 years old. And is he as much with us as when he was in the body? I have to say more. And what does that mean? He was able to achieve what he wanted to achieve. Liberation. and His blessings are with us even more. His guidance, His ever drawing us, pulling us out of delusion towards our own liberation in God and Guru. So happy birthday, Swami. Thank you for everything, always.